that in mind. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm really excited to introduce Summer Gunn, Elsa Perez, Heidi Julander, and Susan Egbert, who will be talking about community engagement and education, and be providing some practical tools for teaching. All right, here we go.
Okay, I'm going to start out. And I am Summer Gunn. I'm in the Department of Special Education and Rehabilitation Counseling, and I'm a professional practice assistant professor. Elsa Perez is in the World Language. Oh my goodness, I don't know what the acronym is all of a sudden.
Languages and Cultures.
Languages and Cultures, and I did put myself notes. She's the co-director of Translation and Interpretation Studies. And Susan, she's in the Logan campus too. And Susan is a clinical professor in social work, and she's at our statewide campuses in Kaysville. Thomas Hicken was not able to join us, but he participated in our book study and learning circle, is that what they're called, right? And he is in technology design and technical education, focusing on preparing plumbers for their plumbing boards. And he's with the Price campus, but lives in Logan. And Jennifer Cloward was a graduate assistant who has now graduated, PhD, and was not able to join us, but she helped to facilitate and help to prepare these slides as well. And then Heidi Julander is a senior program assistant with the College of Veterinary Medicine, and she's here in Logan. Okay, and I think our contact information was supposed to be in there, or is in there somewhere. So if you have any questions, you can also just put our first name and last name in your USU, and it'll find us. But today what we wanted to talk about was this concept of using community engaged teaching and learning in your courses, why you should do it, how to implement it, and how to document or see the product of its implementation. And that's what the book that we reviewed went over. So we'll go through each of those kind of whys, how to design your course, building partnerships with community partners, thinking through student support, how do you assess it, and how do you sustain it. And since we're a small group, if you have questions throughout, you can go ahead and ask them. We're fine to flow a little bit. I think we talked about that and decided that was okay. So go ahead and ask questions as you have them so that you're an engaged learner. Okay. I think we are going to, me. Okay, so I'm going to define why you would use community engaged teaching. I don't know if anybody went to the Spark shop just an hour ago, but the Center for Community Engaged Learning talked about some reasons why. So just expanding on that. Adult learners, so Knoll's adult learning theory really looks at how do adults seek learning? What do they do? And one part of adult learning is that they really have to connect with what they're learning. They have to see the usefulness of it. So finding applied experiences is really important. And it recognizes, community engaged learning recognizes that students thrive through that connection with real world application. It builds bridges between our teaching at Utah State as the land grant institution. We're tasked to serve the public good. And so integrating community engaged learning and teaching into your course meets that objective as well. Okay, now it's Elsa.
So when I started teaching here about almost 3 years ago, I was doing a lot of community engagement activities, but I was not aware of it. I didn't know that there was a course designation that you can do with your content in your courses, where you can designate your course as a community engaged course, and what did that imply, and how can we use it. So first, we need to define what is community engagement. And that is what this sorry, my English is not coming right now. Reciprocity and mutual benefit that are essential. Like, how can you contribute to the community and how your students can benefit from that experience? So there were some very, very good resources that we found in our course. And this is a QR code that Summer put together. It has links to the book that we went through in the course. It also has some links of this presentation and some links for some community, the Center for Community Engagement, and how can you get your course to be designated as a community engaged course. So this is very important that you can have that information. You can have access to it now. So let's talk about laying the foundation of what is community engagement. And when we talk about community engagement, we're thinking of how can we develop the students' knowledge on the civic endeavor. How can they build up skills and they can contribute to the public good? And that's one of the key components of community engagement is like, how can I foster those skills in my students? And how can they make this impact in their communities or in the society in general? So one thing that is important, you can identify community relevance topics in your subject. For example, I teach medical interpreting, and I teach this community class where my students have the opportunity to go to hospitals and serve as medical interpreters. So being able to interact, and be able to have those kinds of exposures, or like volunteer services for nonprofits, that gave them an understanding of the culture, just a general understanding that builds up more a comprehensive set of skills that they would not have only by taking my class in my classroom. So community engagement is very important because they build authentic reciprocal partnerships also with community institutions like nonprofits or hospital or clinics in my case. And because of the needs, you go, like in my case, I interview Intermountain, the interpreters coordinator, and also U of U Hospital to see what kind of needs there were. Like, what are you expecting when someone comes and they are able to interpret for a patient or in a medical consultation? So with that input, I can redesign my courses so that I'm sure that I can build up those skills in my courses so that students can be ready for this. And something very important is to align your goals with the institutional mission. So something that the book talks about is like, sometimes we see community as this whole monolith, like a one piece. And we shouldn't look at it like that. So we need to look at it for different pieces, that they have different diversity, roles, desires, perspectives, and needs. So 3 essential themes in the community learning is the common substance. And that means share experiences. Like, I teach a community class. So in my community class, I have members of the community that are mostly Spanish speakers that came and take my course. And I have USU students that are taking my course, and mostly they are, English speakers, native English speakers whose second language is Spanish. So sometimes I bring those groups together. So my USU students come and participate with my community member students because they share experiences and their perspectives are different from a Spanish native speaker, from an English native speaker. So they also build this emotional connection, the sense of belonging, right? When someone reach out and care, and solidarity with the group. And also the sense of place, the cultural and social dynamics. Like getting into, when I talk about different barriers that students can face, or like patients can face, like limited English proficiencies. Patients, for example, face is like getting into a new system. Just by getting into a new system, that's a totally different barrier. And I'm not just talking about language, but just the systemic. Like, okay, in my country, you know, I will have the first contact was with the primary doctor right there. I never talked to a nurse before. And here's a different system, right? You go through different processes. So things like that to help them understand. The preposition of matter, avoid working for the community, and try to use the preposition to the community. I work to the community. Embrace working with the community, respects agency and capacity. And the last one that I'm going to talk about is this intercultural competence. You know, it's very important to have this cultural humility to identify and reshape unequal power dynamics. Like in my case, again, between the doctor and the patient, they have a different power dynamics. So the interpreters or my students serve as these, you know, they try to equalize that power and dynamics. And model vulnerable behaviors like admitting limits of knowledge, honor community, identify priorities and needs, and just recognition of social, political, and economic contradictions in society coupled with commitment to act against oppressive forces or humanization of all people. So critical consciousness cannot be developed by traditional academics in classroom spaces alone. They need to go there and be exposed, right? So that's the best way of learning. And I think now is who?
Back to me.
You're back to, okay.
Okay. One thing that I just want to share too, that was one of my big takeaways from the book, was thinking about those aspects of community and really understanding, like what Elsa said in this last, about how we speak of our interaction with our community partners, instead of doing something for or to the community, doing it with the community or in collaboration, right? And so when we're thinking about designing our courses to include community engaged learning opportunities, we need to think about what is our purpose in this community engaged interaction. What is it that, like, because we have to know what we want out of it as we approach those community partners, and then understand what they want out of it and see if those align. So you would want to identify what's the focus. So for me, I teach in the special education program, and I teach courses where my students have to have practical experience with in early intervention, so with infants and toddlers and their parents that have disabilities, the infants and toddlers, or in a preschool setting for preschoolers with and without disabilities. And so my focus is really on helping them to gain those disciplinary skills. But secondarily, I want them to understand the experience of being a caregiver of a child with complex needs and what that's like, and not to see it as like a what's the right word? Compassionate, like I'm coming in to take care of you because things are so hard for you kind of view, but to build some solidarity with that community and connect and see like the value of their identity and the diversity of their experience. So both of those things are my focus. So disciplinary is like my main focus because that's why I have my classes, and that's why the state wants me to have a special education program, is to prepare people for the discipline. But in addition to that, I want them to gain some solidarity with the community so that they can be better at implementing those disciplinary practices. So I need to understand that as I go into my community partnerships. And that will help shape the objectives. So the focus leads into clearer objectives. My community partners include early intervention agencies and school districts here and across the state. I have built those reciprocal relationships through partnership over time, by offering to conduct trainings to problem solve or workshop around concerns that they have, and then see how needs that they have and the concerns that my community partners have about their incoming professionals and the needs of the families and children in their programs, how my courses can help to support fulfilling that need in the future. And so we start with that because it's disciplinary, and then also that solidarity, and we come up with the course objectives. You want to identify, let's see, when I design or revise, like I always reach out to those community partners. Right now I'm doing some revisions for a course this fall, which I feel like I'm playing catch up since it starts in 2 weeks. But instead of just like implementing those changes, I've reached out to those administrators in the preschool programs and said, these are my ideas. How does that better fit or contradict what needs you have for your new professionals? And then I'll take that back and come back to the drawing board, where my objective is that I want my students to be able to understand the experience of caregivers, the concerns and triumphs that they have when having a child with complex medical needs. And so how I go about that and how I have my students go about doing that really has to involve those community partners, because I actually designed one assignment a couple years ago with my community partners, with the administrators, and they were like, yes, this is great. They were going to do parent nights or have parents come into the preschool classroom or provide coaching to parents through technology. And when we got down to the classroom teacher instead of the administrators, they were like, I don't know what to do with this. And so that assignment has not been very effective for all of my students. Some it's been great, others it has really fallen flat. So if I don't have them involved in how do I meet that objective, it's gonna fall flat. So you're next.
All right, I'm Susan. I'm actually the director of the Master of Social Work program for the university, and also coordinate for statewide. So I'm kind of curious who's in the room. Are all of you faculty? Are some of you grad students? Who's faculty? Okay, grad students? Okay, wonderful. Thank you for being here. And I just want to talk about some of the really practical pieces of community partnership building. In social work, we actually have accreditation required practicum experiences. At the BSW level and at the MSW level, we have 2 separate ones, and it totals about 900 hours in organization. So this is something that is formalized for us, but we use it in other classes as well. So just really wanted to talk practically about building community partnerships. And with regard to finding them, I mean, sometimes it's program driven. You need to meet your competencies. Sometimes it is course driven, if I'm teaching a specific course on community practice or something. And so that's for you to kind of know your context. Sometimes it's student driven. A lot of times with our MSWs, all the time, we interview each and every one of them and say, well, how do you want to build your resume? Where do you want to go? And how can we make this community engaged learning fit for that? Because if you think about it, that's the goal of school, right? We have the course objectives, but also how are we going to help the student build skills and build resumes? Alumni have also been a great source of partnerships for us. And we talk about that as they're in the program. We're going to be calling you. So that's really helpful. When we talk with them, we have to understand the motivations. We have our motivations as educators, but we have to create opportunities for our students to come in and be assets to an organization as well as learners. And those help us derive the goals that we need for that partnership. And then it should kind of be a loop, but I designed it linearly here. To what extent are shared outcomes achieved? We have to talk about our motivations, we have to talk about the goals, and we have to be willing to help the organization contribute to the ideas about outcomes. And so there's some really practical things about that. Conducting a needs assessment with the organization, and then having like a template or a contract for what that relationship looks like. We have done informal ones called roles and expectations. Sometimes our legal department wants those to look a little more formal because we have people in clinical settings and there's some liability issues. Sometimes we go all the way up to MOUs, like with, Intermountain Health or someone. So you might want to ask about what the organization's requirements are, but also be ready to put those roles and expectations in a document that you can share with students. And I always find that I'm a big prevention person, things go better when people know what the expectations are, and then you can kind of talk about when you need to, challenges that might happen. I want to talk about something really, and you can just read these, the context, the experience they've had with the university, the experience they've had with academia in general, and just helping to coach all of the partners, including, we call them agency field instructors, the person in the agency or organization supporting the students' work, giving them a lot of information about what they need to do and how they can access your help if needed, and students as well. Again, things go really well when you have that prevention mindset. Now, I just want to get super practical for a minute. I am actually a full professor, and I might have been one of the first in the university to go to be promoted to full under a teaching role statement. And what we just heard before the Spark talks was that community engaged learning is going to appear in role statements. So it's going to sound, it's really hard, especially for a social worker, to move into self-aggrandizement. And I kind of backwards mapped into a way of documenting community engaged learning and these practicum experiences as part of my portfolio. But I would suggest, from a practical standpoint, as faculty or grad students building your own CVs and resumes, that you figure out a way to quantify the number, the types of organizations that you're partnering with, and figure out a way to quantify the amount of hours, the services that you are actually supervising, and by way of your students, contributing to communities. So I'm happy to talk with anyone about that later. Our time's limited, but I, as a person who's sort of made it through the game, is what I call it, right? Many of us are practice professionals. Academia is a different realm of expectations that we start really thinking about how to map out those efforts and document them. Okay.
As educators, as you can probably expect that your students are going to have varying levels of development of intercultural competence and cultural humility and critical consciousness. We should find ways to help them develop that in both the classroom and in the community setting. The ways to do that, you can have orientation to your community context. And when you do that, you should invite your community members and have them be a part of it and reinforce the fact that they are also a teacher in the course. You want to make sure that your students have a clear understanding of the mission of your program or your course, and also explain to them the history of the organization that you'll be working with in the community, and also if it's a program or like special education, social work, or I'm with the vet school, so they understand that and that mission. Another important thing is for them to have ethical and cultural awareness. You can do that by understanding your own identity as an instructor, and also understand that each student has their own personality and identity, and that's going to affect the way that they interact and that they experience the course. You can model humble behaviors by having an attitude of intellectual curiosity. Go ahead and acknowledge your limitations and be vulnerable, and help your students to do that too. Something that I really think is a great idea is scaffolded reflection. You want to do that before, during, and after your course, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we talk about assessments. some of the things that we do in the vet school that I think is kind of interesting, that maybe I'll go back. Well, I won't go back. But in the vet school, we partner with clinical settings in our community. We call them AVIPs, so Affiliate Veterinary Instructional Partners. And as our students go in there, they're going to have to understand the values of that clinical partner. And not only that, but they need to know the values and the experiences of the different clients that they have. So our students have to deal with their partners, with the clients who are humans, with their patients who are animals, and then also with the other people in the vet office. They also need to kind of look at their own cultural identity and understand that as they go through they're going to be in rural settings, in hospital settings. They're going to really need to understand the different needs of the people there and their partners and what is expected of them. I think that helping our students learn that, they're not going to find this anywhere else unless you specifically make this a focus and teach them that. I put a quote from the book. Here's a copy of the book here. It's really good and really interesting. And I just think that cultural humility is so important, and that we need to find ways that we can teach that in our courses in a way that we can meet with our current restrictions, but also in ways that will help our students develop into better people. As part of reflection, there's different ways you can do that in your course. We talked about different ways you can do it as a large group or a small group. They all have different advantages. I like the large group setting because you can reinforce what you learn in class, and then you can also have a chance to have the whole class together. But your more vocal students are going to be the ones who speak out. Your shy students are going to be the ones that might benefit more from a small group setting. And then if you do things like an individual, that's where you can have them write personal reflections and maybe kind of address things that are more complex or maybe a more delicate topic, and really do some self-reflection.
Which leads right into assessment. So in community engaged teaching, assessment needs to go beyond just the traditional academic outcomes that you're assessing. You also have to assess what are those like ancillary or I teach a connections class and they call them habits of mind. What are those social skills and cultural humility and the things that Heidi had just mentioned? What are those and how are those developing as you develop that academic knowledge? And so it's important to assess both. It's also really important to assess the impact of the community partnership on the community as well as the students' learning, and how effective was that partnership? Are there things that need to be adjusted for the future, or is it a partnership that should continue to happen in the future? Are you getting mutual benefit from the partnership? So ways to do that. Did I have it on the right slide? Oh yeah, ways to do that, like Heidi introduced, is one way to gather information about the students, both their knowledge and the development of those other ancillary skills, is through a reflection framework. So the book talked about these two reflection frameworks, the what, so what, and now what, and the ABC, affect, behavior, and cognitive. I was going to say cognition, cognitive. You can have students reflect written or orally in a discussion, but have them reflect on the experience and how what they are learning within the content of your course is seen in practice as they engage. And again, using this reflection as both formative assessment and a summative, both like beginning, middle, end, and then also an assessment of their learning product. When I switched to doing this this last semester, as we went through the learning circle, my students were a lot more engaged in their own self-reflection using this affect behavior cognitive model versus me giving them a checklist and saying, like, what's the strength and need from that. They would have conversations with each other and with me that were a lot more rich. So I am a firm believer in using this reflective framework to help assess knowledge and assess what additional knowledge needs to be developed. The other thing that I really like about that is how it reflects on how they experienced their learning. It gives me information about how that community partnership is going for my student as they share their experience of their learning. Many students have said, I was really nervous going in to the parents' home. I thought I wouldn't be able to feel comfortable or speak, but after I was there, I actually got along with the parent and I felt comfortable. So I can see that, like, I need to help prepare some of my students for the anxiety of engaging in community partnerships a little differently, and some get it just through experience. And so I was able to see who I needed to give tools to or have more time, like one-on-one talking through some of it, using those reflective frameworks. Also, with reflection, we don't grade feelings. That's one thing that is, you have to think through, like, how am I going to grade reflection so that it really does assess their academic learning and the knowledge and skills that relate back to my objectives. And so using clear rubrics that really have them, I don't know, we just have the keynote that's like, don't do rubrics, right? But I don't know if you said that out loud, but using a clear system of feedback, and I use it within rubrics, is what I use, to assess, like, what was the depth of their analysis in their reflection, and how does it connect to the concepts within the course? How are they pulling from that? Are they referencing, like, key things that we talked about within our readings or our lectures as they discuss the things that they're learning and applying in the setting? And then are they able to critically think about the next step that they need to take in order to develop those skills that they maybe weren't demonstrating within that first reflection? The assessments really should, when you're designing assessments, you should really link back to that focus. Is it disciplinary? Is it solidarity? Is it, I can't remember all the rest of them because those are my two. Link it back to those focus. Am I assessing what I want to be assessing? And then those knowledge and skills that are within your objectives. You can do this through products, assessing the product or the result of the community engaged learning. Maybe sometimes the product is a demonstration of skill or knowledge, and you can do that through live or video. And then also having them talk through their process of learning and what they have learned can also be a good way to assess back to those objectives. So my students create a product, they create a lesson plan and implement that lesson plan and collect data and analyze the effectiveness of that lesson plan. And so that's one way that I assess that community partnership. I also have them either video record an interaction with a caregiver, providing coaching around a caregiver's concern, and then have a rubric that I give them feedback on according to, like, coaching competencies and early intervention. Or we have a supervisor go and watch them live. I also have them use that reflection as another way to gather information. It's important that community partners are involved in that assessment in some way. This is the tool that I use for my community partners in the preschool setting. I have them rate the student based on these key skills, both like academic, like implementing the disciplinary practices, and also how they do it, like the quality of their interactions within and their personal responsibility. The thing with when using the community partners assessment within the student's grade is you need to be able to understand your community partners and understand how they will complete these feedback. Sometimes there's partnerships where I have somebody who is a recent graduate of mine that's mentoring a pre-service teacher, and they don't want me to think that their classroom isn't working well, and so they will rate that student really high even if it doesn't match up with what their supervisor says. So I always have the way that these weight within their overall grade, so that it's not too heavy, but it's also recognizable whether their community partnership was effective or not. It's also important to evaluate that relationship with the community partner. So these are some questions listed in the book that you can use to kind of pull out some information about how the community partnership did or did not go. And I think we're back to Elsa.
Any questions? I was kidding. So the last part is sustaining and scaling, and basically what we do in this part is to recommend faculty growth through collaboration and mentorship. So there are like different parts. You can mentor or co-mentor or even coaching some of your colleagues. Also having some institutional support, so you can reach out to the Institute for Community Engagement or the Center for Community Engagement, and they can give you some guidance on how to build up activities with community engaged related topics. Also, if you are planning to publish with community engaged scholarship, I need my glasses, sorry. You can found your scholarship in theoretical grounded and integrating teaching, research, and service as part of the scholarship. Also, you can do research together with some of these nonprofits or community partners that you have. Some of these, they have funding for research, so you can make some, in this collaboration, you can get a scholarship out of, as a product. And also reflect the principles of civil democracy and shared authority. And the last part, I think, is very important, which is to be an influence in institutional change. And that is, how can we as faculty be change agents in the way that we moving from grassroots mobilization to institutional transformation? And that is how these initiatives can reshape some of the practices that we have in the university or in our surrounding circle of influence, and how can our students benefit from these initiatives. Also, what kind of impact is my community engaged course is having in the communities, and how can I measure that impact? And using scholarity goals towards politics of solidarity and also social justice as well. And the last one is increase the knowledge on community issues and policies. And this is when legislature or community partners are very interested in changing politics or the way that we can contribute somehow with the scholarity products or our experiences to reshape those policies or to build up a more sustainable way of being engaged with community partners. Do you have any questions so far? No, because we're almost done. The last time, and I think Summer already covered this part, right? How can we always could be a reflective practitioner. And there is a model that I think she mentioned already, well, it was mentioned in the book, and I think it's important, like knowing in action, reflection in action, and reflection on action. And the difference is, before, what kind of knowledge do you have, in how that knowledge is going to help you in whatever activity your students are going to do, like what is the previous knowledge they have, what are they feeling during the experience, and what can they learn from the experience. And that's basically the 3 blocks that this model reflects. So 4 frames of reciprocal reflection will be personal, identify values, calling as an engaged scholar, what it means to be an engaged scholar, professional, what is the institutional culture, do we have enough resources, how is USU facilitating that engagement? Student, what is the impact on the civic behaviors and transformative learning? And then the community partnerships as well. So, and then just think about, you're going to finish, right?
Yeah.
Wrap it up.
Yeah. Well, I was going to do a Slido to kind of see what your action steps are from today, but we have like 4 minutes and want to leave time for questions. So, and I think you can come up and field questions. But if you have a step that you want to take, we'd love to hear it.
We'd love to hear what you might be doing now, ideas you could share, or steps that, some idea that was brightened by this conversation. Anyone? Yes?
I have a technical presentation about a question regarding community engagement. In addition to the teaching, thank you. In addition to the teaching, now there's a lot of funding like NSF and other government funding. They also ask you, to have a plan for community engagement. So I'm wondering if there's anyone or any office officially located at USU that can help us to identify some collaboration with the community. Thank you.
Summer, are you going to look that up? Provide that resource? Okay. Anyway, yes.